Hello and welcome to episode 8 of World War II Moments in Time and the story of Narvik, where we're moving away from the Southern Front to sort of paraphrase about it, quote Gandalf and Churchill. The Battle of Southern Norway is over and the battle for Narvik and the north is about to begin. The Germans are moving up to Trondheim, the British have withdrawn from Namsos, and there is now not much between Trondheim and the forces that are cut off in Narvik. So we are going to sort of move to focus more on Narvik and what's going on up there. So the British have landed at Harsted. They couldn't land at Narvik following the Third Battle of Narvik, as they didn't have any troops on the warships, and also they didn't know the German dispositions, and so they deemed it too dangerous. And instead, they decided to move to Harsted, which is on the island of Hinnoy. Harsted's got a good harbour. Peacetime, it's dedicated to the fish and herring meal factories there, but it's a fair-sized port, and they can handle quite a lot of incoming vessels, which is handy for the military. There's a good road of which they can then advance from Harsted to Narvik. There's only one slight problem. They have to catch the Tjedsund ferry, get across the fjord, but they reckon that's fairly easy to navigate, and if they should advance that far, they shouldn't get any extra problems from the Germans to do it. The French have also arrived, and they have they've sent 3 battalions of the Chasseurs Alpines under General Bethuard, and they land at Ballingron and establish themselves on the northern side of the fjord at Lenvik. On the 28th of April, Bethuard meets Maxey, who is the senior British Army commander in the area, and they agree that they want to take it slow and steady and advance gently towards Narvik and not do anything crazy, like go charging into positions that they don't know about. They're also trying to get all the equipment and munitions and men in, so they want to take it as a gentle exercise. Admiral Cork, the Admiral Lord Cork, who is the theatre commander, wants to be a lot more aggressive, and he wants to use indiscriminate naval bombardment of the town of Narvik to keep the Germans busy so the army can advance pell-mell towards them and before the Germans can properly react. Parliament aren't too happy about that. And instead there's a suggestion that they should try and drive the Germans off the northern side of the Rombach fjord and establish artillery positions on the Oyjord, whilst the Allies clear the Ankenes Peninsula and advance to the head of the Bjesfjord. And then they can land on the southern side of the Rombach fjord and drive the Germans towards Hundaland. The first step for that would be for the French force landing at Salingen, and then they can join up with the Norwegian forces to the east. British High Command communicates that the south has fallen and that the forces at Narvik are now the final foothold in Norway. They also instruct them that a force will be detached to Bodo, mainly made up of the Scots Guards, to secure the airfield so that there could be a possibility for RAF operations and or to deny it to the Luftwaffe.
Speaking of the RAF, so when the RAF are what they're doing right now is they're looking at sending forces to the north, including the shattered 263 Squadron of Gladiators, but also 46 Squadrons Hurricanes with 501 and 40 Squadrons Blenheims. They were forming at Uxbridge in April, but when news of 263 Squadrons' destruction, the rest were delayed as it was clear the southern front would collapse. So instead, they would be heading north. Now, Wing Commander Atcherley and Squadron Leader Bell, they go to Harstad at the end of April to look at possible airfields and decide the fighters that should operate from the Norwegian fields at Bardufoss and Skånland, whilst the bombers should operate from Laxley at Forsinger Fjord. But the problem is they all need work, all of these locations, particularly when it comes to snow clearance, as they're covered in at least several feet of snow. So drains are put in on the runways to help keep them clear. The flak defense would also be needed, as well as air raid shelters, better runway surfaces, as well as many other small logistical things that the RAF would need. The 2 RAF officers and Flight Lieutenant Masterman, they work really hard to get all of these things organized practically on the spot. And by the beginning of May, the RAF air component was being collected, and they were also reconstructing 263 Squadron. Now, meanwhile, while this is going on, the Luftwaffe were also consolidating their position for future operations, such as upgrading the Varsnes airfield and the arrival of a squadron of long-range bombers and a group of 109. Now, at this point, you would think that the RAF would attack the airfield, but we have to take into consideration it's 460 miles away from the Shetlands and 760 miles from the bomber bases in Yorkshire. If they did arrive, they had a small amount of time to find what they were looking for and attack the target before having to go back. And they had found earlier in the campaign with operations against Stavanger Sola airfield that the losses would far outweigh any results they would be able to accomplish. So, by May, the Luftwaffe are operating one squadron of HE-111s, 3 squadrons of Stukas, and 3 squadrons of 109s from Varnes at Trondheim. 3 squadrons of HE-111s, 3 squadrons of BF-110s, and 1 squadron of Coastal Float HE-115s are at Stavanger, and 3 squadrons of BF-109s are at Kristiansand. At Oslo, they have a further 7 squadrons of bombers of various types, 1 squadron of HE-111 bomber reconnaissance planes, and 3 squadrons of Army Co-op.
Well, that brings us nicely to Bodo, because on the 3rd of May, Admiral Lord Cork, who is the theatre commander at this time, is told that the road from Trondheim north should be blocked to a German advance, and Bodo needs reinforcement. So 2 independent companies are dispatched to Mission and Mo, with 2 more to Bodo itself. But this now brings us probably to the most exciting, and I don't know really if exciting is the right word to use in this context, because it does sort of, we end this a bit with a tragedy, but the Poles finally get mentioned. So I'm going to let Chris talk about the naval history and the Poles, and hopefully Chris will be able to pronounce all the names correctly, and if he doesn't, I will step in.
So we've already mentioned Cork at least twice today. Well, the problem with not having the RAF available to bomb targets, you kind of need a different kind of fire support. And Churchill, who, if anyone's read anything I've ever written or seen me on social media, knows I'm not a big fan of Churchill when he's in charge of the Navy. He gets involved. He's anxious that a prolonged campaign in Narvik would lead to deadlock for what he considers, because it's the Guards Brigade, it's the best brigade in the British Army, and he doesn't want them sort of being depleted in the same way that forces were depleted in Gallipoli. And he said there'd be sort of an unnecessary wastage of men, material, and he urges for quick and violent action. And so, clearly, having not learned anything else from the Gallipoli campaign, they send the warships in, and the Navy are going to attempt to do what the RAF can't, and bring destruction to German airfields and positions with unrelenting violence and force. Earlier in the campaign, you have Operation Duck, which took place between the 16th and 18th of April. The heavy cruiser Suffolk, supported by the destroyers Harewood, Kipling, Janus, and Juno, guided in by the submarine HMS Seal. They managed to bombard the airfield of Stavanger before turning north to destroy some German destroyers, but they come under blistering German air attack, which kills 32 and wounds 41 on the Suffolk and leaves her with a heavy list. And it's so bad that when she gets back to Scapa Flow, they have to beach her to stop her from sinking. Elsewhere, the battlecruiser Renown under Vice Admiral Whitworth repulse the anti-aircraft cruiser Cairo and the destroyers Eclipse, Forester, Fury, Tartar, Javelin, Kimberley, Hyperion, and Bliskovitza and Grom leave Scapa Flow to assist the Suffolk. On the 19th of April, the Polish destroyer Bourgeois, Grom, and Bliskovitza leave to assist operations off Narvik, though Bourgeois had to return due to storm damage. On the morning of the 25th, the Bliskovitza is sat off Narvik in a snowstorm, trying to get an idea of what was going on in the town, and they receive orders to bombard and destroy military objectives, including bridges, viaducts, railway objects, and monitor the Germans' movements. And this was carried out by the cruiser Enterprise and the Bliskovitza, and reports were made of all German movements. They also attacked the railway bridges in the Rombax Fjord, firing 76 shots in 20 minutes, which is really quite impressive. On the 26th, the Polish crew reports seeing an aircraft at a distance, which turned out to be German transport aircraft dropping supplies to Dietl's forces before returning fire on German artillery positions at a distance of 2,000 meters and joined by the Enterprise and by the destroyers Bedouin and Zulu. On the 29th, the Grom replaces her, because she needed to go and resupply oil reserves and prepare for a believed German naval attack on the fjord, and then rejoins the force on the 2nd of May. On the same day, it was believed that there was going to be a Luftwaffe bombing attack, so the destroyer goes to zigzag to try and throw off any attacks and is cruising along at 25 knots, which is about 23, 24 miles an hour, which is quite speedy for a destroyer. Thankfully, it was not a real attack, and they go on to begin shelling, including... I found this quite funny. I was reading through the log earlier, and it's actually they said, we opened fire on a suspicious hill. So I'm going to take it that there were German forces moving around that hill, possibly. They also fire on other German troop movements. Although successful, she did also take some damage and was ordered to stand off. To quote the log, without ceasing fire, captain withdrew the ship from the narrow fjord and from under the shore, under enemy fire, manoeuvring only to one port machine because the right one was independently immobilized by a shell piercing the steam pipe. There's also damage to the starboard side engine room, damaging the choke in the right engine and the oil collector, as well as the sailor's galley, which is the kitchen for those who don't know, and several other important systems, wounding 3, and, as stated, knocking out the right engine completely. This meant that the destroyer was completely useless and vulnerable, and so she is to be withdrawn from the fjord and replaced by the Grom. And that does not go well.
No, that doesn't go well. And I really didn't want to do this podcast because I don't really want to talk about what happens to Grom, because it's really sad. And a loss to the Polish Navy.
Yeah, when it only consists of 3 destroyers at this point, and they're about to go down by 33%.
Yeah, I don't know really what to say about it, because, I mean, we'll do a little bit more on the extra content talking about the Polish Navy. Shock, horror, I'm going to be talking about the Polish Navy, let alone talking about the Navy at all. But, I mean, Grom's gone through a lot so far in the war, and her soldiers, this is what I'm talking about. Can't even talk about naval history. Her sailors have, undergone retraining and whatnot, and this happens.
Yeah, I mean, she goes in and she's basically looking for the emplacements that have wounded her sister. We were talking offline about how the Germans hated Grom because
Oh, yeah.
she got in close, like really close to the shore, and both of them from the logs of both ships, they get in really close and just, 76 shots fired in 20 minutes. I mean, I think a British destroyer can fire 10 shells a minute from its forward gun. So 76 in 20 minutes is quite impressive. And they're firing machine guns. They're literally, as soon as they see any kind of movement, they're just firing at it. And every time the Germans stick their heads up, they're finding themselves being shelled by the Polish. And Grom went in really close. And so she goes looking for the anti-tank, because it was an anti-tank gun that did the damage. So they're looking for that. And they're firing on anything that looks like a gun emplacement. And on the morning of the 3rd of May, she also gets hit by a German anti-tank gun, which does a mixture of damage, but nothing too serious. Her commander looks for the suspected enemy position and then bombards it, and also a group of houses and villas on the brag, before going to another position. And that day, Grom fires 500 shells, which is a ludicrous amount.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, are you really surprised that Grom and Błyskawica and Burza are being so, I think aggressive might be the right term of phrase here. Are you surprised that they're being so aggressive at this stage in the war? Because, they've escaped, which we'll talk about later, the September campaign, right? Where they should have, not even existed because the German Navy should have taken them out. Number 1. Number 2, they know what's going on back home. number three, thousands of people have lost their lives already by this point. Wouldn't they want to pay the Germans back?
Well, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I don't blame them at all. But at the same time, I don't blame the German infantry who are, you know, just moving around, and they're just moving out of cover, and they're just having everything thrown at them. I could understand why they have this hatred as well for the ships.
No, it's completely understandable. Didn't we had some paraphrasings about how badly Grom kind of really wound up the Germans. So what's really interesting is that the Germans tend to use in a lot of the testimonies that they write about when they talk about Grom is they kind of, I think the nicest way that they describe Grom is the great Polish destroyer, and things like it's not so nice, like that cursed Pole or the human hunter or that Polish devil. Those are what you see quite often. It's I mean, they should be using that, because if they were aggressive, the Poles were really aggressive at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got to think as well, these German infantrymen, they're a long way from home. They've been stuck there for a best part of a month now. They're only getting supplies that are being airdropped. It's snowing. They're cold. They don't know if they're going to survive. And suddenly this Polish warship's just standing a few hundred yards offshore, firing everything it's got at them. So I could see why they'd hate it and be calling it cursed and things. It's like, just please leave us alone. Go away.
Can I give you a quote then?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a quote, and this is from a diary of a German officer fighting in Narvik, and he states, "It's that damned Pole again." From the direction of Rombachen, the menacing grey silhouette of a warship appears. It suddenly emerged like a ghost, without the slightest sound, as if someone was towing it on a rope. We all clung to the rock instinctively, and the destroyer stood still for a moment. It seemed that it was watching us, not those people standing on its deck. I mean, it kind of, in those days where you have like pirate ships, and the sailors describe like this pirate ship just coming from the smoky fog, and it just, it creeps up and it appears. That's what I think of when
Yeah.
I read this testimony.
Yeah, it's kind of unreal, isn't it?
Yeah, and the thing is, they continue writing and things, so you can see quotes like, "Our hatred for him grows from hour to hour." Like, they seriously hate the ship, and it's if it wasn't so what's the word, tragic, it would also be really funny.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is that they're doing minor damage with their anti-tank guns, but they can't really sink these ships either. So this invulnerable vessel that just appears, brings down death and destruction upon them, and they just can't do anything to it until the Luftwaffe turn up.
And they got to stop it. Well, I don't know. I think we should get Zane involved in this.
Yes.
What'd I do now?
Talk about the downfall of Grom when the Luftwaffe get involved.
Well, after breakfast on the 4th of May, so May the 4th be with you, the Grom came under attack again, but this time from the Luftwaffe. You've got two Hinkel HE-111s. They're approaching at roughly 27,000 meters. The anti-aircraft officer, Lieutenant Rohovich, began firing, but the destroyer was soon hit, wounding and killing several of the deck crew, and started fires aboard. Now, another strike lifted the ship violently up on the starboard side, and there was no other course of action, and so the order came. The ship is sinking. Boys, jump into the water. The attack lasted all but 2 minutes. Only 2 bombs had hit the ship, but it appeared that they had caused the compressed air tanks for the torpedo launching system that had exploded, causing massive damage below deck and breaking the ship in half. Within 3 minutes, the ship was gone, with no time to lower the lifeboats, throw out any rafts, or destroy any ciphers. To make it worse, the hatch at the boatswain's room was blocked, stopping any escape from that section.
I mean, this is horrific. To be honest, a 2-minute attack and then 3 minutes for the ship to go down.
Within 5 minutes, it disappears.
Yeah. Completely. In 5 minutes. And in 5 minutes, you could do quite a few things, but also practically nothing at the same time.
Although the captain would report afterwards, to quote, "The crew behaved exceptionally throughout. There was not the slightest panic. When they told her to jump into the water, people asked if there had been an order from the CO to abandon ship. It's hard to imagine greater camaraderie in the water. The boys helped each other. All the wounded were placed on rafts. I heard them shout, 'The commander is with us.'" And he also would go on to say that two different sailors came up to him and offered him a life belt as well. So they're trying to keep the captain alive, which is quite impressive. I also saw the British newsreel about the bombardment, and there are several British ships off nearby, and they get in really quickly and start fishing people out after half an hour. And they're talking about the people that have been rescued. And the best part of it said the 4 British liaison officers were all fished from the water with their dog, and they had a small Jack Russell Terrier with them as well, which survived the sinking.
I want to say but I mean, a lot of people also died in this.
Yeah.
They saved the dog, but how many people actually died?
It was around 53, I think. 147 survivors, but 53, about a quarter of the crew were killed.
And some of them couldn't even get out.
No.
I mean, Zane just mentioned that.
Not even with the time they had available.
That must have been an absolutely huge blow to Polish morale. I mean, to Allied morale in general. I single out the Poles here, but in general to the Allied morale, because they were all fighting together.
Well, yeah, it would have been bad, but they've also lost so many other destroyers already in the Norway campaign. But even just in Narvik, they'd lost 2 of them in the Second Battle of Narvik. Their wrecks are still lying around the fjords. They've had several heavily damaged. We lost 2 of them in the Namsos retreat as well. Is it the Bedouin and the Afridi? So this is something that's happening all the time to the Navy. It's just this is the first Polish one to go down.
Yeah, I think this nicely kind of opens up the subject of the Poles. Obviously, we're not going to do it now, but this is a kind of like our little window into talking more about the Poles and the Poles that are ending up on the land battle as well. And, how did they end up there? And we're going to be covering that in the next couple of episodes, though, right?
Yeah, we'll be doing the landing in the next episode. But if you want to know more about the Polish Navy and how 3 Polish destroyers managed to escape, do head over to our Patreon, where we're going to be Alina's going to be telling us all about Operation Peking. But yeah, as we said, the next episode we're going to be talking about the military landings in the Narvik area. And we'll be, for the next month or so, we're going to be looking at the toing and throwing of forces around this region to its ultimate conclusion. But thanks as always for listening. Thanks to Alina and Zane for joining us. And any stars, likes, comments that you want to make on your preferred podcasting channel of choice will be greatly received. And any retweets or reposts on X, Blue Sky, Facebook, wherever would also be greatly received. And do check out the Patreon.